Hi, welcome to my channel. I'm Gina. Earlier today I showed you one of my very early scrapbooks, this one. A lot of cuttings, mostly from 1957, some earlier. The next scrapbook I'm going to show you is this one, and I've been reading it before I went through it, deciding what I was going to do. As an introduction, I suppose I want to say that what I'm about to read from you in this book is going to, if you're a younger Elvis fan, going to change your perception of Elvis forever as an entertainer. I mean, not in a bad way. I'm just saying that what the fans wrote about him, what the media wrote about him, is long gone in today's books. The people that wrote about him then are probably maybe dead and gone. The journalists, May Mann, Llewellyn Parsons, Hedda Hopper, were around, and they interviewed Elvis in the 50s because Colonel Parker was allowing interviews because they were generating publicity for Elvis. It was only in more recent years, or the later years of Elvis's life, that he didn't need the publicity anymore and didn't want to be interviewed, so that's why they stopped, except for the major interviews like New York and ones in Hawaii. Sorry about the stammering, getting tired. Okay, so I'll go through the book first off. Just grab, I've got this in the background for a particular reason. I'm going to try and do it this way. Again, it's mostly text, but there's some great early photos. So we'll flip through it quickly. Try to line it up with the camera, otherwise I've got to pick the camera up and then try and reposition it. Yeah, look, I'll hold it here, and then if anybody wants to see close up of the photos later on, I can do it again. But as you see, all very early stuff. Some of them you have seen before in the publicity shops, others you won't have, because they were taken at the time. This is just an article about Jailhouse Rock. There's that one. That's a very well known photo. Lots of text. A few cartoons, a lot of cartoons around about Elvis in those days. 50s. Not all of them kind. Okay. And finally, the last page, an advertisement for the record player that RCA put out, particularly for Elvis. Okay. Now, the first article, I probably won't read much from this one, is by Llewellyn Parsons, who was a very well-known journalist in the 50s and 60s. She says, starts it off to the fans, I thought you might get a kick out of a completely verbatim account of my talk with Elvis. I had a secretary on hand to take down our interview exactly as it took place at my home in Beverly Hills. So I just want to reiterate that these are the people that met Elvis, knew him and talked to him and wrote it all down as it was. You get the people like Alana Nash, Peter, what's his name, Jerry Hopkins, who researched Elvis as much as they could and wrote books about him, and they're supposed to be the authority, but they never met him. They never spoke to him. Completely different interpretation. Elvis's grandpa, who lives here, awaits a singer's visit. That's Elvis's grandfather, Vernon's father. Minnie May's ex-husband, Jesse. He's there. An article about him when Elvis came to visit them in Louisville. Okay. This these particular articles were about Elvis's appearance in the Jefferson Armory in Louisville. I think it's Kentucky, isn't it? Teenagers squeal, flashbulbs pop as Elvis sings. This was all, of course, in 1956. Teenagers deliriously squealed as flashbulbs of shutterbugs shot off all over. The whole armory suddenly felt like the inside of a heavily pounded drum. Elvis had sprung forth in all his glory, plus a green dinner-type coat and black slacks. Elvis, the ideal of every red-blooded American girl. He wheedled squeals out of his fans with 25 minutes of high-emotion singing, then disappeared under heavy escort. Unable to corner him, fans did the next best thing. A bevy of girls touched the microphone he had used, and some other girls kissed the palm of their hands after rubbing them over the stage dirt that he had trod on. All this was at the matinee show yesterday. It drew a sellout crowd of 8,500 people. The night crowd, being more adult, was slightly more sedate, but Elvis was even livelier this time, wearing a satiny gold coat and shaking hands with two girls seated behind the stage. Police chief, who attended both shows as an observer, said, and something of a cynic, said he was generally well pleased by the audience conduct. One exception, he said, was a 20-year-old girl who offered police $100 to get a button off Elvis's coat. 3 men were arrested before the afternoon show for drinking in a washroom, and 2 Illinois girls were arrested at night on vagrancy charges. About 100 police and 60 ushers were on hand, spreading cordons around the hall's interior and exterior. Hestus, the police chief, said this was a record number of ushers, and Presley drew a laugh from the crowd when he remarked, "I never knew I had so many fans in the Louisville Police Department." The matinee crowd waited impatiently for Elvis through 75 minutes of tap dances, impersonations and the like. Then, as he made his advent, the bottled-up emotions burst the cork out. He said thank you, and there were shrieks from the crowd. He panted briefly into the microphone. More shrieks. He got into the first notes of Heartbreak Hotel. More shrieks. Through his wholehearted singing and half-hearted guitar strumming, he'd hunch up his shoulders like a football tackle ready to leap. Or he'd stomp back and forth with the mic, his 6-foot frame firmly flexed, suggesting a Frankenstein's monster. Every change of motion brought shrieks. By moving back and forth rather than sideways, Presley adhered to the strict rule that police officials had laid down with his agents. Sideward motions, the police felt, would have been luridly suggestive. The throng's ears and oohs were so insistent that Presley's words were usually unintelligible, even by his standards. The voice came through even if the words didn't. Here was a clean voice, broad in range, sure in rhythm and tender. And the Presley spirit came through. He was the Presley of fast modernism, shiny Cadillacs, mixed with the Presley of boyish simplicity, the hobby of collecting teddy bears and cotton country origins. He was a figure who seems both innocent and knowing, a 21-year-old who is both worldly and of the inner heart. That mixture of personality is part of his magic. He went through many of his recorded hits, knifing the air with his hands in Don't Be Cruel, sinking his voice and even choking in Love Me Tender, pointing an accusing finger in his final number, Hound Dog. Let's see. A big help in preserving order for the crowds was a mystic swiftness of Presley's entrance and exit. A taxi whisked him to the armory from a back door of a hotel where he had slept and breakfasted in near secrecy until due at the afternoon show. Before showtime, a few girls managed to find out what floor of what hotel he was on, but 2 bodyguards kept them out. After the show, 100 girls followed him, even looking for him in the basement. Again, no luck. Except for the press and police, no one was allowed to stand in front of the stage. All rows of seats were corded together to keep them and the sitters from getting tossed around. Along with other public and private gendarmes, yesterday there were volunteers who had been studying at Southern Police Institute, policemen from Alabama, Florida, Louisiana and Texas. Interviewed before his dash on stage, Presley said of the criticism that has been levelled at him, "You've got to accept this criticism along with everything else, no matter who you are." Asked if he thought his artistic style contributed to juvenile delinquency, he answered, "I've never shot anybody or robbed anybody." Does he plan to switch more from rock and roll to the ballad type singing represented by Love Me Tender? "Well, I don't know, sir," he replied, pondering. "I'm just taking things as they come. I don't want to switch anything as long as people like it. It's like if you've got a good complexion, you don't put any makeup on it." Presley had expected his parents to be here from Memphis, but the folks got snowed in. Okay, now there's another article here. November the 25th, I think, 56. Elvis plays to near-capacity crowds at Jefferson Armory. Elvis and about 15,000 dyed-in-the-wool fans yesterday gave Louisville one of the most fascinating studies in mob psychology the city has ever seen, the questionable pleasure of witnessing. Let me see, Elvis was preceded by... Then came Beecher Frank, a disc jockey who was awarded a plaque in Presley's name for work in supporting the young singer from Memphis, Tennessee. Frank referred to recent newspaper articles critical of Presley and said that in America, it's not the cultural commissars, not the social snobs who have the say in choosing stars, but we the people. "God bless America and God bless Elvis," he cried and introduced the singer. The north end of the armory went suddenly blazing white as kids fired flashbulb cameras. So intermittent was the firing it seemed like a huge spotlight had been turned on. Nothing changed in years to come. Simultaneously, a roar went up that seemed sure to blast the walls from the armory, and Elvis appeared in a Kelly green neon bright jacket. He stepped to the microphone. The teenagers, girls far outnumbered the boys, screamed. Elvis turned his head. They screamed again. He blew across the microphone, checking to see if it was turned on. The crowd screamed. He sang, but one couldn't hear a word of it, even though his hit tunes, such as "Don't Be Cruel," were vaguely recognisable by the dull chord changes behind Presley. Presley kept bumps and grumps to a minimum in compliance with an order issued some days ago by the Chief of Police, but there are occasional hints of pelvic manipulations that were credited as much as anything with making Elvis Presley a household word, and these really brought the house down. Girls of 14 and 15 would go glassy-eyed, tense and quiver all over before resuming their screaming. Observers who remember the Frank Sinatra fad inclined to think it exceeded in more ways even that. Sinatra crowds lacked this sense of hysteria. Okay, and there's some of the photos that were taken by the newspapers at that time. So I should have marked these, shouldn't I? There's some really good... There was a letter from Barbara Hearn. There was a magazine, and Barbara Hearn, one of Elvis's girlfriends, used to answer questions about Elvis. 16 magazine. "I've had hundreds of people ask me that very same question, and it's a very difficult one to answer. Elvis is a wonderful person, that's for sure, but how is he so wonderful? What does he do to make the people feel this way about him? That's the difficult part to answer, but let me try. Elvis is very thoughtful, yet at times he is very forgetful. He may forget your birthday, but he'll always manage to say or do something nice, just at a time when you need a friendly word or smile. He's a devoted son, and his parents come first, regardless of everything else. He's easy to get along with, and at times he's a real comedian who can keep you in stitches. He appreciates everything that people do for him, and the letters and attentions he receives. He regards his good fortune and his accomplishments very humbly, for there is not the least bit of conceit or swell-headedness about Elvis. Elvis is far more intelligent than most people give him credit for, and his mind is always working on some important task or song or stage routine. He has a restless nature, always likes to be on the move. He doesn't spare himself in the least. By that I mean he drives himself very hard. He is a model son and accepts all his responsibilities and never shuns his duties. I've known Elvis a long time, and he's always been a perfect gentleman. I think he is a credit to his country and to his profession. I'm proud to call Elvis and his family my friends, and I always shall. Isn't that nice? Yeah. Okay. Now, this is controversial. How much time have we got? Okay, this is an open letter to Elvis, printed in a newspaper, 1958. Dear Elvis, please don't be offended at this letter, but you've done some things lately I just don't understand. Before I could always think of some good reasons when people said bad things about you, but now, gee Elvis, I just don't know what to say anymore. Honestly, I don't. My girlfriends and I were talking about it the other night. One of them, she's my best friend, said her father showed her a story in a newspaper where a man who had seen your show in Los Angeles said you were lewd and that you were actually corrupting a lot of the teenagers because you were exciting us the wrong way. And then Jackie told the girls that I went to see that same show when I was in Los Angeles, and I could tell them the man who wrote that in the newspaper was lying. But Elvis, I couldn't. I wish I didn't have to say this, but that man wasn't lying. He was telling the truth. I know. I saw that show, and I remember it. When I remember it, I feel ashamed of the things you made me think of. Okay, I'll go on to the show. She got her mother to take her there. Thousands of girls making it all a racket. Let me see. We waited nearly an hour while some musicians played a lot of rock and roll. Then you came out, Elvis, and every girl except a few like me started to scream and shriek. Mum put her hands up to her ears. I'm not the type of girl who screams and faints at the sound of your voice, but I am, as you know by now, a loyal and faithful fan. So I waited for you to talk. You did say something into the microphone, but I couldn't hear it because of the screaming. Then you started to bounce a little and strum your guitar. I couldn't hear that either. I could see you were singing, but honestly, Elvis, I didn't hear one note. Then you grabbed the microphone and began petting it as if it was a girl, I guess. You were singing then too, but I couldn't hear because the screaming got louder. Then you started to wiggle your whole body and pulled at your clothes as if you were going to take them off. Some of the girls around me fell on the floor like they were having a fit. Some of them grabbed their faces in their hands and dug their nails into their flesh and closed their eyes and pulled their hair till it came out at the roots. Pretty soon there was a big noise behind the curtain and some men pushed a big statue of a dog, like on the Victor records on the stage. I think you started to sing Hound Dog, but I couldn't hear it. Then you went down on the floor and made love to the dog as if it were a girl. You rolled over and over. You pushed the dog and it almost fell off the stage, but your manager, Colonel Parker, kept pushing it back at you. And you kept right on singing and rolling on the floor. Then everyone seemed to go mad, and for the first time, Mum looked really frightened. One girl right near us snarled like an animal and bit her own arm. I thought Mum was going to be sick. Finally, you went off the stage. Then all the girls went up on stage and used their handkerchiefs and pieces of paper to rub the floor where you stood. One girl grabbed the microphone and made love to it. Another girl rolled on the floor, just like you did. The policeman had to drag her out. Mum said, "We better go." When we got outside, Mum took a deep breath and she looked at me. I knew what she was thinking, but she didn't say anything. We walked to the bus stop, sat down on the bench. She had tears in her eyes and she was very sad. And the only thing she said was, "I'm sorry, Mary Lou." And Elvis, I cried too. The next day, the newspaper said you had performed in a disgraceful, lewd and disgusting manner. They said the police from the Vice Squads came to see you the second night, but you'd toned your act down. And they said you told the audience, "You should have been here last night." Oh, Elvis, I was there that first night. And all of a sudden, I couldn't be proud of you anymore, Elvis. Wow. Wow. Oh, man. Yeah. So, I just thought that was unbelievable. That was unbelievable. And there was nothing else I wanted to write. Let me see. Elvis did a show, let me see. Oh, that's quite a good article. Okay, that's quite a long article. I need to sort of pull some pieces out of that to read out. A strange twist for Elvis. Now where are we? What's it to say? Which one else? Yeah, okay, this one. This is interesting, this is good. What Elvis means to us. This is written by a fan in 1956. I'm an Elvis Presley fan. People don't understand what it means to be a fan. It's different from just liking the way a man sings or acts or the way his lip curls. It's very much the way it is in baseball. You watch a few games and suddenly you find you're rooting and you care very intensely which team wins. In some way or other, you're with that team. Their success is your success. Their failure is hard to live with. I feel that way about Elvis. I want to call encouragement to him when he's on the stage, although I know I shouldn't. And I do write him letters, just simple letters, thanking him for the pleasure I get from hearing him sing. I don't sleep with his picture under my pillow, but I think I can understand the girls who do. There's no harm in dreaming, and Elvis is the kind of man we wish was ours forever. Maybe it's just that to us. He is simply the most exciting man in the world. Oh, I don't think I'll ever end up the girlfriend of Elvis Presley, although I doubt he'd have to ask twice, but I find I have the most intense interest in him. When he began taking out Natalie Wood, I was worried. Silly of me, maybe, but I was worried. I like Natalie. She's sort of wacky or flighty, and in some way too sophisticated for Elvis. When he settles down, and I hope he won't do that for a long, long time, I hope it will be with a simpler girl, maybe a small town girl or one from Memphis. Maybe, what I really want to say is one like me. I worry a little about Elvis going into the army. I worry when he seems too interested in motorcycles and fast cars. I worry when certain people whose names I will not mention hang on to his coattails pretending to be friends just for publicity, or write lying stories about him just for the money. Maybe I just worry about him. I get angry when I read the attacks on him because I feel they're on me too. Twice Elvis has had to use his fist to defend himself. At times like that, it seems the world's crazy. Maybe the world is crazy, but when Elvis sings, he seems to be saying, the world is ours, because inside of us is life, and life is all that counts. It fills us and crashes out of us as music. Nothing can stop it, not even death. Don't be afraid of the life in yourself. It was put there by God. That's enough for music to say, isn't it? Okay, I've just got a timer on the microwave. If it goes bip, that'll be the end of my camera. Okay. Eddie Condon. I think he was a journalist, not quite a musician anyway. He's supposed to be an expert on music, Dixieland, and that's okay with me. I like Dixie once in a while. He says, when my daughter Maggie discovered Elvis, she did not exactly go nuts. She went stark raving cuckoo over him, began wearing an Elvis Presley charm bracelet, refused to go to sleep unless she was surrounded by her enormous collection of pictures of his delinquent-like map. Let's take that last crack. Delinquent-like map, meaning face. Remembering that art experts have pointed out that Elvis looks almost exactly like the ancient Greek statues of Apollo, and remembering that these statues are still considered to be the very ideal of masculine beauty. Well then, you tell me who went cuckoo. Was it Maggie or Eddie? Elvis even wears his hair like Apollo. Because I'm angry about this, I asked the editor of Screen Album if we could print a picture of Eddie Condon next to a picture of Elvis, so you'd get a chance to see who looks more delinquent. But the editor said no, it wouldn't be kind. He's right, we should be ladies and gentlemen, but sometimes I wish we weren't. But what bothers Eddie Condon, I think, is what bothers my parents and probably yours if you're under 21. When Elvis sings, it doesn't sound like music to them. Once I went to a symphony, very long hair, and they played something by a composer named Schoenberg. I'll never forget. It sounded as if the zoo had caught fire, but it was somebody's dish of tea, even if it wasn't mine. Maybe just being young, we don't have a preconceived idea of what music should sound like. We listen with a fresher ear, something I'm sure of. In 20 years, I'll probably have children, and just like me, they'll be fans and come home with records or tapes, and I'll listen and try to understand, and I won't be able to. And I'll have to bite my tongue so as not to say, what's wrong with kids these days? Why don't they listen to real musicians like Elvis Presley? And that was written in 1957 or 56. Let's see. I don't know if I'm out of time or not, but I think I've probably read the bits that I wanted to read. So, yeah, I'm going to check this video out and I might have to do it again. But if I don't, that's it. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly can read more. I've got some from the other book that I want to read out too, but that'll do for tonight's video. Bye for now.